folks, Philip here. This is Turtle Studios, and this is an affordable guitar once again. A very affordable guitar, actually. These fit in that sub $200 category, kind of competing with Donner or Glary, some of the cheaper Squiers or Epiphones. This is the Valley series, and I believe the Strat is the Canyon series. I might have that mixed up. That's not really the point. I just kind of like the naming scheme. But yeah, these are pretty cool guitars. You know, they have some standout features like the rolled ball fret ends, which are pretty nice, especially on import style guitars like this where fret sprout could really be an issue. That's not quite the point of this video. You know, in the couple videos I've been making about these, I've mentioned, you're going to want to do a setup or, some upgrades out of the box. And that's a pretty common sentiment you see across a lot of reviews of people reviewing cheaper instruments. And I'm realizing that's not always a super helpful way to convey something that needs to be done. The setup could be different on cheaper instruments where quality control isn't necessarily super high up on the list of things they're doing, different from instrument to instrument. And then the upgrades are just going to be different based on, your personal preference. So I figured I'd make a video just kind of going over what I've done to both these guitars and where they're at now. So the first thing I check really on any guitar you get new, especially when it's been in a box for a while, is the relief on the neck. That's an adjustment you can make with the truss rod. There are plenty of tutorials online how you can make that adjustment, even some that I've made. Maybe I'll link them down below if I remember. The guitar should come with the tools you need to do that. It's a very simple thing. You can definitely do it yourself. And usually you can get the action dialed in just a little bit lower, which is at least my preference. Might not be yours, but something I usually do. On the topic of action, there are different ways you can adjust the action. So when it's a guitar like this that has this Tune-o-matic style bridge, you can of course raise up or down either of the bridge pieces. This one didn't really need any adjustment there, but I've had other guitars where you can kind of drop the bridge piece a little bit and get the action a little bit lower. On something like this Strat, you can adjust the bridge saddle pieces individually and raise those up and down as well. Strings are of course a great and really easy way to improve a guitar. The strings that come on these types of instruments are usually pretty cheap. And just putting on a slightly nicer set of strings can really help improve tuning stability, the way the guitar sounds, the way it feels, the way it plays. So that's definitely a really easy thing you can do just to, make it just a little bit nicer. Of course, if you're going to be doing more major setup work or upgrades, you probably want to wait to change the strings because you'll have to have them off anyways. The next couple things are where the setup can get a little bit hairy depending on the guitar you get. That's the nut and the frets. I'm happy to report both of these guitars didn't really have issues in either of these areas. They were both pretty consistent. The frets, as I've mentioned on both of these guitars, are really awesome with the rolled ball and fret ends, so they didn't require any fret work. They don't have fret sprout. There weren't any high frets up and down the neck on either of the guitars, so it really didn't require any attention other than just kind of polishing and cleaning them up out of the box, which I did, with the first string change. That's another item you can definitely do with the setup, is just cleaning the guitar off, making it look nice. And then finally is the nut. This is another issue that could be a little hairy. Most of these guitars will have a plastic nut, in this price point at least. For the most part, they're going to work fine. They're not as resonant as bone or synthetic or, higher quality materials. The strings aren't going to ring as nicely, so that could certainly be a point you could upgrade, which I'll get into later. In terms of setup with cheaper guitars like this, sometimes you might see some, like stray bits of plastic or whatever. I don't know if they're 3D printing these nuts or cutting them, where they just haven't been cleaned up super nicely. So you could usually go in and clean that up, but I would definitely recommend replacing that. It's going to make the guitar play and sound a whole lot nicer. In terms of upgrades, the easiest upgrades right off the bat, if you truly are a beginner player, you're going to want to upgrade the amp you have out of the box. These come with these little battery powered, almost handheld practice amps. They're like 5 watts, they'll get the job done, but you'll want nicer amps, nicer effects, pedals, maybe an amp that does some basic effects. The gig bag you get with these particular ones, you actually get a pretty decent gig bag, and I've seen that with some other cheaper brands like Donner and stuff. It's nice when the bag does actually have a little bit of padding, so you can, take this guitar to a friend's house or something and have fun and not worry about it too much. And then getting into the nitty-gritty and the parts of the guitars that I've upgraded, which are the different components you can kind of take off and replace and swap out. The good news is there's tons of aftermarket parts, and for the most part, they're just drop-in as long as you make sure you're getting the right sizes and everything. Just do a little bit of research. First off is the tuners. That particular guitar, one of the strings was giving me some tuning issues, or one of the tuners was giving me some tuning issues. It just had a little bit of jumpiness. That's a phenomenon you'll see with cheaper tuners where I guess the gears aren't cut as precisely. So somewhere in the range of the tuner, it'll just, it won't be as smooth. And you notice you'll be turning it and it won't happen. And then the string will jump a lot in pitch. You can definitely get it in tune. It's just a little bit more of a hassle. This guitar actually didn't really need an upgrade to the tuners. All of them actually work fine. I might put some locking tuners on here just to make string changes easier, but I really haven't needed to upgrade them yet. So that's pretty cool. The next area is pickups, and this is another one where I actually like the pickups that came on one and don't really like them too much on the other. I did not upgrade the pickups on the Strat style guitar. I actually like the pickups that came on this over the spare pickups I had from my 2006 or 2007 Stratocaster there. It's a made in Mexico model. So yeah, those are pretty cool. That has a humbucker in the bridge, a coil split. The coil split's not the best, but the humbucker's fine. It gets the job done. The pickups on this guitar, the neck is fine, at least to my ears, and the middle position is, relatively balanced out. The bridge is a little harsh, it could have a little bit more body. I might get around to putting some different pickups in this. It's not super high on my priority list, but this guitar I think could probably use some nicer pickups. Electronics are another area where you might very well see issues. Good news is neither of these guitars have had any electronics issues, at least out of the box. Keep in mind I've only had them for about a month or so. It's very likely that some components like the switches and stuff might start failing on these. I've definitely had that happen before. The switches they put on these are usually printed on a PCB or something, and they just wear out over time. The good news with that is the electronics you put in these, even the nice ones, are pretty cheap, but you do need a soldering iron and a little bit of know-how to get that done. As I kind of mentioned before, the nut is an area you definitely want to upgrade. I put a bow nut on both these guitars actually, and then this single cut guitar had something interesting. When I got the plastic nut off of there, it was hollow inside. Which is something I don't think I've ever really seen before. I guess maybe they're 3D printing these. It's just kind of weird. Like, how much could they be saving? Maybe a penny on the plastic? It's just like, come on, just at least do solid plastic or something. And then the last area for upgrades are, of course, aesthetics, and this is where it can kind of get wild. You do have a couple things that actually improve and change the playability on the guitar. The Strat especially needed a couple things. So the string trees, I replaced them with these roller style ones over the cheaper bent metal style ones that it came with. And I, of course, replaced the bridge. I actually put a 2-point trim on here, and I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend that. I had to fill in the old holes and re-drill new ones. This was more because I actually wanted more of a traditional Strat. My Mexican-made Strat I have back there, I've actually put P90s in. It's kind of a crazy different guitar now, so this one was more of a traditional style, and I wanted a bridge that worked pretty well. But yeah, depending on what comes with the guitar, you could very well need to upgrade the bridge or just set up the bridge. And then, of course, you just have aesthetics. This guitar, the Strat, I've actually replaced the knobs on. I just think they look a little cooler with the little silver in them. This guitar, I haven't done too much aesthetically with, but I do really like the finish. I think this could be a really cool guitar if it had kind of a blue and gold aesthetic. I just don't have a lot of extra gold hardware lying around, but maybe if I ended up with some extra gold foil pickups or something, I'd start changing this out. But yeah, that's sort of what you want to keep in mind, at least what I kind of think about when I get cheaper guitars like this. For me, it's a really fun hobby, and I keep an eye out for deals and kind of hoard all these different parts and components. So when I see a cheap guitar or get a cheap guitar, I can just kind of swap out parts and have fun. And I really like this process overall of getting a more affordable guitar and upgrading it and making it play great. My primary player is an ERK guitar, which is a little bit more expensive. They're like $400-ish instruments, but that thing's great. It's like just as good as American instruments I've played. But anyways, those are my thoughts. I'll probably play a little bit on the way out here, and have a good day.